Hello, and welcome to Aviation 101 with Laura. Today, we're going to talk about something that's a little bit historic and then a little bit of Laura's FAA rant on what's going on currently with dispatchers. So, big question is, why is there a minimum age for aircraft dispatchers? Now, more like, why is the minimum age for aircraft dispatcher age 23? When a commercial pilot, an air traffic control operator, the minimum age, for example, is 18. Same for a flight instructor. Same for an aircraft mechanic. There's a lot of FAA certificates where the minimum age is 18. But dispatchers, seems like this weird abnormality. Why do you have to be 23? Spent a lot of time actually answering this question for my own students, who some of them are not 23 when they take the aircraft dispatch course that I teach. So let's dive into the history of this. And first of all, I do want to give a special shout out to the Aircraft Dispatchers Federation. You can check it out on their website, dispatcher.org. I also have a link in the video description to a lot longer of the exact Federal Register where the first regulation introducing aircraft dispatchers was in fact published. But the history of dispatchers goes back to 1937. If you want to read a lot more about that, I wrote a paper a few years ago which was published in the Collegiate Aviation Review International Journal. You can find it on Google Scholar. I'll again link to that. There's more on my website. But essentially, aircraft dispatchers are very closely tied to operational control. And because the dispatcher has operational control, it is shared with the pilot in command. And essentially, this rule that came out from the CAR at the time, it was the Civil Aviation Regulation. It was 27.1 back then. And the precursor to the FAA published it and said, you have to be 23 years of age, you have to be of good moral character, you have to have some work experience, or you have to go through a special school. There were some test requirements, there was citizenship requirements. Okay, once again, if you want to read the entire rule as it was written in 1937, we'll link to that in the video description. So it's pretty interesting. However, this tied into that age requirement. So this age requirement, 23 years, goes back to 1937 when dispatchers first became certificated airmen. Before that, there was no certificate to be an aircraft dispatcher. Airlines had them, but you didn't need any specific certificate of any kind. You just got hired as a dispatcher and you just did your job. Okay, so let's also tie in who is operational control shared with. Well, it is actually shared with airline transport pilots. And if you go back to that same exact Federal Register file that I'm going to link to, it's from November 1, 1937, you'll see that the CAB said that ATP, or airline transport pilots, also had to be age 23. And operational control was shared between the ATP and the aircraft dispatcher. So the only conjecture I can come up with, or conclusion, is that the reason they set the age requirement at 23 was because both the aircraft dispatcher and the airline transport pilot in charge of each flight, as the captain, had to be at least age 23. Okay, that's it. I can't find any record of where the FAA got age 23. Fun fact. Prior to this rule in November 1, 1937, there was a certificate called transport pilots that was issued, but those people could be 18. So I have no idea why the CAB, precursor to the FAA, said 23. No idea. No idea if they researched it. I have no idea where they got that number. So that brings us to modern times. Okay, so dispatch course graduates can take the dispatch practical test at age 21. I have students do this all the time. So then what happens when they test at age 21 or they test for the certificate at age 22? Literally nothing happens. other than they get older every day and they wait to turn 23. A lot of other things have happened along the way. We had the change allowing restricted ATP. So now an airline transport pilot can get the restricted ATP at age 21 if they go through the requirements to get the restricted ATP. But there has been no change to dispatchers. Now, I understand a restricted ATP cannot act as the pilot in command. They don't have an unrestricted ATP. To be 23, that unlocks now the unrestricted ATP and the ability to be the captain of the flight, the pilot in command. Once again, goes back to sharing operational control. But my question really has been, for years now, if you're age 21 or 22 when you pass the aircraft dispatch practical test, literally nothing happens. You just wait till 23. If it's restricted ATP at age 21, I understand you're gaining flight experience. You have more hour requirements to unlock the restricted, get that off your airman certificate and you're also 23. You actually gain experience along the way. Dispatchers, no, we just sit around doing who knows what for potentially up to 2 whole years until your 23rd birthday, when then you can go get your aircraft dispatch certificate. I have a whole video on how to do that, so check that out if you're in that situation. But my main question is why? Here's Laura's FAA rant. What do you think about this? Now, I've heard some pushback from airlines hiring people who said, oh, well, I don't think that 21 or 22-year-olds are mature enough to be aircraft dispatchers. Okay, so evaluate them when you're hiring them. Don't hire the immature ones. But my main question is, hey, FAA, why not let the 21 and 22-year-olds just get the dispatch certificate? We don't need knowledge that we've gained in aircraft dispatch school just sitting around, atrophying, forgetting stuff that we learned while waiting to turn 23. When it appears that 23 is an arbitrary number that the CAB in 1937, with who knows how much, probably no, research on some kind of brain maturity level of 21 versus 22 versus 23-year-olds. No idea. And side note, I've met plenty of really mature 21-year-olds and 22-year-olds, and I met some far less mature 23 and over year old adults. I think it's totally dependent on the person. So what do you guys think? I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Yes, this has turned into a little of a Laura rant on the FAA, but what do you think? Should we let dispatchers become dispatchers at 21 or 22, like when they finish their dispatch training? What's the big deal? That's what I want to know. What do you guys think? Thanks for watching Aviation 101 with Laura. Have a fantastic day.